Dette Trond Vatne-Tveiten, og dette JointPod, podcast nummer 2. Som sagt, så skulle vi intervjue en del cannabisaktivister verden over. Men jeg har faktisk valgt å sette det litt på pause for å lage en podcastserie angående den nye rusreformen i Norge. Som sagt, Stortinget skal komme sammen nå i september, og forhåpentligvis så får vi en ny rusreform. Men som sagt, det sterk motstand fra politiet og Kristelig Folkeparti, og pluss representanter fra ulike andre partier, så hvorvidt denne rusreformen kommer til å bli vedtatt eller ikke, det uvisst. Uansett så skal jeg lage en podcast der jeg henter inspirasjon og henter kunnskap fra andre aktivister verden rundt. Og med oss i dag så har vi Ray Lakeman, som også har vært aktiv i Anyone's Child. Hello, Ray.
Hello there.
I saw your video on Anyone's Child and that was extremely tough. So I want you to explain to the listeners what you was going through.
Well, my story begins in December 2014. My two sons, Jacques, who was 20, and Torin, went to see a football match, Manchester United game. They were both big supporters. They both living away from home at the time. One was at university in Wales, and the other one was working down in London. So they got together to go to see this football match, and they stayed together during the evening. But they didn't come home. They didn't get back to their respective homes the following day. And in fact, we found out 2 days later that they'd in fact died. That they'd taken an overdose of what turned out to be ecstasy. So both my sons died on the same evening, which was probably the 30th of November 2014, and as you can imagine, it was a big shock, and it's been a big story just simply because of the sheer horror of it, I guess.
A lot of people would just say now that is a good reason to ban all drugs and use the police on young people, but you are in a different view on that.
Yeah, I have a totally different view. What became apparent in subsequent days as we tried to unravel exactly what had happened and leading up to the inquest and everything, it became very, very clear that that regardless of the laws that prohibit drugs and things, the people were taking drugs. My son's story got a lot of publicity, and I was talking to some of their friends and things like that, and they were telling me that they were shocked and saddened by what had happened, but they weren't going to stop taking drugs. They wanted their drugs to be made safer. And when it came to the inquest, it was about 5 months after their deaths, for the first time I came across this phrase, that there was a recreational dosage. So the police, the coroner, everybody involved with the inquest were actually talking about a recreational dose of MDMA, something which they knew could be taken safely. They knew exactly what the dosage was. Everybody knows that there is a safe dosage, but because of prohibition, because we don't legalize and regulate these particular drugs, or they were buying. My sons bought it off the dark web. They had no idea what they were buying. They just wanted to, have a good time, and there's all kinds of reasons why people take drugs. But I was absolutely shocked and scandalised to realise that the drug could actually be safe, and so could so many other drugs could actually be made safe. That doesn't mean to say that I'm advocating people take drugs. I'm just aware of the fact that people are. It's become obvious that regardless of the fact that there is terrible risks with some of these drugs, it's not going to stop people taking them. There is a risk of death. There's a risk of being criminalised. And what we're doing, what the current laws do, just aren't changing things. It's not acting as a deterrent. The people who actually want the laws to continue, prohibition to continue, don't understand why people take drugs. They don't understand that whatever their stance, whatever their view is, that there's a significant minority who will not go along with that view. And these people, there are all kinds of things that I object to and don't agree with in all aspects of life. Over here, I live on the Isle of Man. My boys were brought up over here. We have the TT races, and the races are very, very dangerous. There's a cyclist killed every year taking part in these races. But we don't ban it. We try to make it as safe as possible, And drugs is the only thing that I can see where people actually believe that just by turning around and saying, these things are bad, these things are evil, stop doing it, we can make these things safe. We don't have to agree with people using it. We don't have to agree. We don't even have to say that they're good.
The police in Norway says that you have to put an example, because if not, society will use even more drugs and more people will die. What do you have to say about that?
Well, people are dying already. Statistically, there are more deaths. There certainly are here, and I think worldwide, you can't stop the supply. You're never going to stop people wanting to take drugs. If you are happy with the death toll rising, just to prove your point, and they need people to die to prove their point, and I find this morally reprehensible. Most of these deaths are preventable if the will was there. If for instance, there is no doubt that had my sons taken a dosage which they knew to be safe, which has given them the high that they wanted, they would still be alive. And that's the same for lots of other people that I've been in contact with who've lost children through similar kind of events. This drug can be made safe. Most drugs can be taken safely.
Yeah.
This would prevent deaths. It would prevent deaths. If you're genuinely interested in harm reduction, you don't do what we've been doing consistently, since the United Nations banned drugs right across the board, which has caused far more problems, not just in Norway, countries right across the world. The violence has increased. Drugs have been handled by gangs. Gangs are making huge profits. There is no evidence whatsoever that legalizing drugs is going to increase drugs usage. There is no evidence. There's absolutely none whatsoever, because it hasn't happened. There hasn't been a country that has totally legalized and regulated drugs. So how can you possibly turn around and say that this is what's going to happen? Portugal has gone, some way to do it, but they haven't legalized drugs. They've just decriminalised its usage, but they've seen a huge change in, death rates, which is what we should all be interested in. If we are genuinely interested in that, then we should look at our statistics. We should look at what has been going on. We should say, since this was introduced by the United Nations, and in the United Kingdom, it was 1971, we introduced this Misuse of Dangerous Drugs Act, which, literally overnight criminalised people who were using drugs, which didn't happen before. They weren't criminalised and things like that. It was dealt with in a completely different way. Drugs have been handed over to criminals. Criminals are not bothered about, the quality. They're just interested in the money. They're not interested in regulation. They're not interested in looking after anybody's health or anything like that. But they will still supply the market, and there will always be a market. Just turning around to people and saying, no, you can't do it, does not. Banning things doesn't take the market away. It moves the market to somewhere else. And at the moment, it's handed over to criminals. And anybody who supports prohibition, all right, is actually turning around and saying, well, we're happy for people to die. They need people to die, to show that drugs are dangerous. But they're more dangerous than they ever need to be, because they're illegal. It could be very, it really is. You regulate, you legalise this, that, and the amount of criminality will drop, the amount of deaths will drop. Whereas at the moment, it's exactly the opposite. And there is nothing the police or anybody else can do, or any drug organisations, enforcement agencies, to stop these. They will never ever be able to stop, people wanting it and a market supplying it. And that is realistic. That is being pragmatic, and to argue otherwise is it flies in the face of common sense. Because if it was possible to win the war on drugs, if it was possible to prohibit things, if it was possible to stop, it would have happened a long time ago. And this stuff has been enforced now for over 50 years. This attempt to stop people using drugs and to ban drugs and this, that, and it hasn't worked. It's just that, in fact, the situation has got worse. And I think that in any other area of policy, apart from drugs, if something had been so poorly inefficient, if it had been so inefficient, so ineffective, people would have changed it a long, long time ago. And there just seems to be something about drugs that, people think it was carved in stone. Drugs are wicked. Drugs are evil. People who use drugs are not wicked people.
Yeah.
They're ordinary people, and there is a total misunderstanding why people use things, why they're doing it. And this belief that you can actually, just by banning something and criminalising people, it's insane. It's just madness.
A lot of people, are listening to police because people think that when the police say something, they are right. But why is police enforcement so hard on this? Because I've been talking to police officers who are against today's politics, but they will not go forward because they say to me, like, our career will be destroyed. I cannot say this to you. Why is the police so hard on continue something when you know about, the story about prohibition against alcohol? Why are they so fanatic on it?
My own view is I think it's ignorance. I think that they need to go back. They need to look about why it was banned originally, and this whole concept that drugs are dangerous. Of course, anything that is any drug that is used and not controlled is going to be dangerous. Yeah. By definition, alcohol is the same. you control it, or you control it as best as you can. And different countries have different approaches to that. But you don't ban it, because banning it isn't going to stop people doing it. It's impossible to actually do it. And the police need to go back and think and understand. And this is not just the police in your country. It's politicians and play all over the place who need to go back and look at what actually happened, because there was no scientific evidence, to prove that these drugs were dangerous. It was an American, forced issue onto the United Nations. All of a sudden, drugs that weren't a problem became an issue. They became dangerous. They weren't before. Most people didn't have a problem. Most people didn't even know that these drugs existed. It didn't impinge on people's lives until they were banned. And now it does, because, and if the police really, really want to sort the problem out, if they genuinely do, and certainly over here, there is a movement to sort of understanding about how better to deal with this issue. The issue is, and they have to deal with what the legislation is. And I guess the legislation is pretty the same in Norway as it is over here. They are told that these drugs are, possession of these drugs is a criminal offence. I mean, you're criminalising people who, are just doing what other people do when they have a drink.
Yeah.
Or have a cup of coffee. And it sounds silly, but that's exactly what you're doing. That's what and people who use drugs don't see that they're breaking the law. They don't see the sense in the law. And if the law is nonsensical, you've got a significant amount of people who don't see why that law should apply to them, then that law is unenforceable.
I work with nightclubs and pubs and so on, and what I think is very interesting is how random the drug laws really are. Because I think it's what I call social dumping. Police are very hard on some types of people because they are smoking weed, because they look like in different manner and they come from different sorts of society. But what I also see is the rich people are smoking coke, like sniffing cocaine and everything else, and they get away with it. The police don't give a shit. So they look at what kind of people they can find on the town and like, oh God, this is a drug addict and he is a problem. When a lot of other nice Wall Street guys just go pass by.
Yeah, well, I think stereotyping, and this is a big problem with changing public opinion, is this, stereotyping of people who use drugs, whatever they might be. And this is one of the reasons when I talk about my boys, because my boys had a fantastic upbringing. We live on the Isle of Man. We live in the open air. They did everything they wanted to do. They sailed boats, they played chess, they played soccer, they played rugby, anything that they wanted to do. They were both, good musicians. So, they had a really, really good lifestyle. They're not stereotypical what people would say. And most people who take drugs aren't. You see your things on your telly, this, that, and the other. See, it doesn't matter whether they're heroin users, cocaine, but when we had our elections for the Prime Minister of England last, whatever it was, 18 months ago, and it turned out that there were about 8 of the 11 candidates for the leadership of the Conservative Party who actually admitted that they'd used drugs in the past.
Yeah.
That is the reality, and they're turning around and saying, well, we deeply regret what we did and this, that, and the other. But the fact is that they did it when they were young people. They're admitting that they did it when they were young people, and now but they will still continue to say that other young people, and they got away with it. They weren't criminalised, but they will have other people who do similar things to what they did, criminalised, and that's outrageous. It's just beyond belief. And the other thing about the laws, it's been about 50 odd years since we've gone down this road of prohibition, which is the United Nations adopted and insisted on enforcing. But 50 years is not a long time. But nothing has changed in the legislation. Governments and politicians and police officers, they do U-turns and change their minds on things, on so many things, but drugs seems to be the one that nobody changes their mind on, and they haven't changed their minds on in over 50 years. And you have the example of prohibition, as you mentioned earlier. That was a total disaster. And this war on drugs and that, it has been a total disaster. And if you think that a rising death rate is a success story, if you actually think that you can win this thing by continuing to ban it, you really need to have a really hard look at what is going on. And if you're happy for people to die, and you prove to me that that if you legalise and regulate drugs, the death rate will go up. How on earth can anybody say it?
The police in Norway says that the number of people using cannabis in Norway is so low. That is a reason why the Norwegian politics on banning cannabis is so successful.
They don't need to be.
No, because I don't know anybody who will tell to a poll that they're using cannabis anyway. I'm working on the cities. I see people using drugs all the time. And I don't know. I never call the police about them because I think it's just a fucking waste of time. Because I want the police to do other things.
It's used everywhere. Right, yeah. Cocaine is used. I'm not saying I agree with it. I'm not saying, but we have to acknowledge that it does. And if we are genuinely interested in reducing harm, if we don't want what happened to my boys to happen to other people, if we don't want to see people arrested, for what is a lifestyle choice, some of them that, it's a health thing. They honestly believe that, cannabis can cure whatever their ailments are. We shouldn't be criminalising people for that sort of thing. I mean, it's absolutely ludicrous. We wouldn't do it for anything else. And there is no science behind it. There is actually no logic or science behind prohibition and what is going on, and all that is happening is people are dying unnecessary. What difference would it make if more people start taking something? You think about it. More people might start taking ecstasy, but if it was regulated, less people would die. What do you want? What is the best option?
Yeah.
And with cannabis, if people will continue.
Yeah. What I think is strange is how hard it is, because I lost a former radio show I had because I claimed that you should legalize cannabis, and I also lost friends over this issue. Why is it so hard to mean something different than banning? On this issue, it's like I feel sometimes like a criminal just because I'm claiming people should not be punished. Why is it like that?
a question of education. People need to be educated. They have been told lies for so long about these drugs. You know, it's and you know what they're being told isn't true. Has never been true. You know, they need to understand why people use drugs, what they get out of it. Look at their own lives. You know, if they go home and have a glass of wine, or go home and have whatever it is that they choose to do, if they, like a cup of coffee, if they like sugar, salt on this, and these are all things that aren't necessary. They just make us, we don't need them. Nobody lives on bread and water.
No.
We all like little things that enhance our mood and change things, right? So somebody likes weed, right? I don't. But it shouldn't bother me that somebody else does. No. I can't take a high ground and turn around and say, well, I like having a beer, I like having a glass of wine, but you can't smoke. I don't like smoking, full stop. But who am I to turn around and say, well, I like doing this?
Yeah.
Yeah. But I don't like you doing that. Who am I to do that? Because it is exactly the same thing. They're doing, taking cannabis, using cannabis for whatever reason they choose. Sometimes it helps them relax. Sometimes it's because it relieves pain, and sometimes it's just because, it makes them feel good. And I don't see what is wrong with that. Doesn't mean to say I have to do it. Doesn't mean to say anybody else has to do it. But what is wrong with that? If everybody else is allowed to do, things that they choose to do, which I don't like, which I may not like, which I may not want to do myself, I wouldn't turn around to other people and say, you can't do that because I disapprove.
No.
It's nonsense.
But when you're going to talk about regulation, how do you want to regulate it? Because there are different models of how you can regulate and how you can put it in order. I see United States have one model. I think their model is a little bit strange because a lot of different. In Norway, we have very strict regulation on alcohol. Like the state sells the liquor and wine. You cannot have wine and liquor in convenience stores. You have to stop selling them after like 8 o'clock in the evening, and there are regulation on pubs and so on. What kind of model do you want to regulate drugs?
Well, it has to depend on depends on the drugs, whatever drugs are involved. I mean, when I think about it, and I talk about regulating, people think that I want a free-for-all, and people can just go out and take whatever they want, whenever they want, and I don't want that. I don't know anybody who does. I should imagine. I mean, one of the things that we've done very successfully is, with tobacco, which was everybody was using it, and you educate people, you cut down, you make it more and more difficult and less attractive. That is what you do. If people want to use cannabis, they will use it. Yeah, and they're already doing that. That is what. First of all, you have to understand that they're already doing it. So what you do is for cannabis, you have to create a model that turns around and says, we understand you're going to do this, right? These are the products you can have, and you can grade them like you do with, they've done with tobacco. They've been so successful with tobacco. They should use that as a model for cannabis anyway. Yeah. In the United Kingdom, you can't buy. If you go into a shop, it's all behind a grill. They're not on obvious sale and this, that, and the other. You have to ask. That is what you have to be sure of what your age is and things like that. Yeah, but you know what you're getting, and you can then turn around to people and say, "Look, you can have this. Okay, if you do anything outside that, you're breaking the law."
Oh.
So if you accept what, and that will differ in various places, they won't all understand. But this is what we're offering. Yes, you can do this. You can have that, whatever you decide. But if you go outside this, you will be breaking the law. Now, I think that is a move in the right direction. With MDMA and stuff like that, you would do exactly the same thing. You could go, like you go for Viagra and this, that, and you go to a chemist, and you would say to the chemist, "Right, can I have this?" And they will give you, this is a dose. Yeah, this will get you high, and this is what you're going to get. We're not going to give you any more because this is all you need. And that should be fairly straightforward. Not everybody's going to do it. Even going to somewhere like a chemist or somebody that's licensed to sell it will put some people off. Well, that's what you want. You don't want everybody going out and buying it.
No.
And just be able. But that is what we've got at the moment. All you have to do is to know somebody down the road, and or a friend of a friend, and they'll supply you with anything. And we don't want that.
Yeah. I want you to, in the end here, talk a little about Anyone's Child, because that organization I just discovered through my good friend Neil Woods. I think a lot of our listeners already know.
I know Neil, yeah.
Yeah, the good author about the book, Good Cop, Bad War. I would recommend to everybody who want to know how to pull.
Well, I think his book on drug wars is excellent.
Yeah,
because it is the kind of book that politicians and police need to know, particularly. And it doesn't just apply to the UK, but it does explain, how things were before we had this thing, the United Nations thing that was forced on everybody by America, and was totally unnecessary and has made things worse. And I think his book Drug Wars is it's a very easy read, but it does explain. But I think people who get their information from the media don't look too deeply and just accept that the problem with drugs has been written in stone since forever. Might see things differently, and that is what we need. We need people to see things differently. And Neil's book, Drug Wars, is excellent on putting everything into perspective. Why we've got the problems that we've got.
Just tell me, and you are in an organization called Anyone's Child.
That's right.
Yeah, and I want you to explain to my Norwegian listeners what this organization is, because we not have anything like it in Norway, because people are afraid to start it. Can you tell me a little about it and why we should have a similar one in Norway? Okay,
Anyone's Child. When after the death of my boys, I knew I wanted to do something. I didn't want their death. I didn't want them to be just statistics, and I wanted to tell their story. And a friend of Torrin, my son, who's at university in Wales, said that he'd been to a meeting by somebody called Anne-Marie Coburn, and she'd founded this organisation called Anyone's Child. And I looked them up and I was interested. And basically, Anne-Marie's daughter, Martha, was 15, I think, at the time. And she died in similar circumstances to my boys. She took an overdose of ecstasy. So Anne-Marie set up this group, Anyone's Child. and basically reaching out and saying what happened to Martha could happen to anyone, because Martha had my children had a good education, but he didn't, and knew about drugs, was quite wise to them, but it didn't prevent her death. And Anne-Marie set up this thing, and it chimed with what I felt. And basically, it's an organisation of people who have lost or come in conflict with the drug laws. They're not necessarily people who have died. And some from MDMA, some from heroin. There are other families that their children have been convicted of possession of drugs, which has completely ruined their lives because of the convictions and the difficulties of obtaining further education and work. So it's basically a group of people who've got together and tell our stories and hope to, influence the wider political picture. We're having some success in the UK. We whenever we talk to MPs, and there are police officers involved. Neil Woods, as you said, Neil comes along and gives his perspective to some meetings. I've spoken alongside Neil on a couple of occasions. So it's when we talk to politicians, they say to us that we're putting a human voice on the policies of the failures of the policies, and we're saying that this doesn't need to happen. It could all change. And governments are responsible, for their legislation. The fact that they haven't changed the legislation, on the drugs for so long, certainly in the UK, and it's obviously the same case for you in Norway.
Yeah.
The fact that they haven't done it, it's irresponsible. I can only. It's no good having a hard line if your hard line doesn't hold, and your hard line is creating issues and problems. By all means, have a hard line if it's working and if it's efficient, but it's not, and it never will be. It's prohibition in any form will never work because human beings aren't like that.
No.
Human beings like taking risks. Human beings enjoy pleasure from all kinds of sources. And that will continue, and you can't arrest people and keep on arresting people. You can't charge people. The effect on society, the cost to society of prohibition and this war on drugs, it's incalculable.
In the end here, then the podcast, what do you want to say to the Norwegian politicians gonna now vote on this new drug reform in Norway? What do you want to say to them?
Well, what I like to say to all politicians is don't and the police and everybody is don't follow the existing story, the story that you've been telling for the last few years. It's the last 60 odd years. It's not true. There didn't need to be a war on drugs. There didn't need to be prohibition. And by prohibiting things, you just made the situation worse. There are criminal gangs that are stronger, more violent than they need to be. We have a wider variety of drugs around that didn't exist before. The drugs that we have are stronger. None of this was necessary. Deaths are rising. People aren't stopping using it. People won't stop using drugs. You need to really think about what you're doing, why you're doing it. It's going to take a brave politician to turn around and say, what we've been doing for the last 60 years was wrong, but gradually that is what's happening. Politicians are turning around and saying, what is happening is ridiculous. We can't continue like that. And every death that there is to drugs, everybody who is being criminalised for using something that, really shouldn't be criminalised, it shouldn't be a crime anyway. Every one of these it's an affront to civilization, basically. If you're a civilized society, you look after people, you acknowledge that we don't agree over everything. We try to keep you as safe as we possibly can, and we can't do it. We can't do it by, carrying on the way we are, because prohibition and the war of drugs has been a disaster, and my two sons are casualties, and there are going to be many more casualties, and most of these deaths are preventable and unnecessary.
Thank you so much, Ray. This was Ray Lakeman. I'm so happy to have you on my podcast and tell your story. Thank you so very much.
Thanks very much.
Og for de som ønsker mer informasjon om Animals Child, så skal vi komme til post. Kan dere følge linkene som jeg har lagt under videoen her, og vi kommer til forhåpentligvis å ha flere intervjuer med Animals Child i tiden som kommer fremover. Det var JointPod podcast nummer 2. Det var Trond Atne Tveiten, og jeg håper du har hatt en interessant lytting. Og gjerne spre den og del den med alle dere kjenner. Hei.